In 1996, a deadly virus ravages the world, decimating nearly all of humanity. A shadowy group known as the 12 Monkeys is believed to be responsible. In a recurring dream, a young James witnesses a man being shot at an airport, with a blonde woman rushing to his side. This vision abruptly ends as the adult James wakes up in a 2035 prison cell to the sound of the warden calling his name. From the neighboring cell, his friend Jose informs him that he's been chosen to venture outside. Rumor has it that those selected for this mission receive a pardon. James is led to another room, where he puts on a hazmat suit and picks up a suitcase. He steps into a disinfecting corridor before taking an elevator to the surface. Emerging from the underground tunnels, he finds himself in a snowy landscape. James starts collecting insects, placing them in a jar. Suddenly, a bear's roar startles him, but it quickly retreats. James searches for bugs, ignoring larger creatures like birds and lions. Under some snow, he finds a sign with a red 12 and a monkey, accompanied by the words "We did it." Moments later, James is back underground, where he undergoes a thorough wash and receives an injection. He is then taken to see the scientists, who lead the remaining survivors. After having his barcode scanned and being reminded of his crimes, he is tied to a chair. James has exceptional memory and observation skills, making him the perfect candidate for a critical mission. The scientists want him to travel back in time to find samples that can be used to create a vaccine. If successful, they promise to reduce his sentence and help humanity return to the surface. In 1990, in Philadelphia, psychiatrist Catherine is called to the police station. There, she learns about a mentally unstable man who was just arrested after taking on 5 cops. This man doesn't show up in any database. When she reaches the cell, she finds James chained to the floor. Between the disorienting time travel and the physical beating he endured, his mind isn't entirely clear. He struggles to explain that he needs to gather information for an emergency. Catherine listens with a mix of skepticism and curiosity as James tries to articulate his mission. He talks about a deadly virus that will decimate humanity, the underground life of the survivors, and the need to find the source of the outbreak to prevent it. Despite his fragmented memories and the surreal nature of his story, there's an intensity in his eyes that convinces Catherine to probe further. James mentions a group called the 12 Monkeys in a mysterious message he found, a sign with a red 12 and a monkey, accompanied by the words "We did it." He insists that this clue is crucial to his mission. Catherine, both fascinated and puzzled, decides to delve deeper into James's background in the enigmatic 12 Monkeys. As James continues to recount his tale, he reveals more about the bleak future he comes from, the animals that roam freely above ground, and the human struggle to survive underground. His descriptions are vivid, painting a haunting picture of a world on the brink of extinction. Despite her initial doubts, Catherine begins to see the urgency in James's plea and agrees to help him, setting off a chain of events that will intertwine their fates in unexpected ways. When James mentions 1996, Catherine corrects him, pointing out that it's 1990, revealing that the time machine failed. Despite his pleas, Catherine concludes that James is mentally ill, leading to his transfer to an asylum, where he undergoes another thorough wash. A guard introduces him to a patient named Jeffrey, asking Jeffrey to give James a tour. As Jeffrey shows James around, he rants incessantly against the system, corporations, and the destruction humans are wreaking on the planet. His passionate diatribes are intense and erratic, mirroring the chaotic environment of the asylum. Later, James is taken to see the psychiatrist. Each time the guards try to grab him, he snaps, resisting their attempts to restrain him. In his sessions with the psychiatrist, James passionately recounts his story, detailing the deadly virus in the 12 Monkeys. He explains that while he can't change what has already happened, he can help the people in the future by gathering crucial information. The doctors, however, dismiss his story as delusional. Desperate to prove his sanity, James insists that he can validate his claims with a phone call, pleading with them to give him a chance to demonstrate the truth. However, when James tries the number the scientists gave him, it's answered by a regular household. He realizes that, since this is 1990, the number doesn't connect to the proper answering machine yet. That night, James dreams about the airport again. He wakes in the middle of the night and looks out the window, only for Jeffrey to explain that it's impossible to open it. As Jeffrey launches into another rant, James finds a spider and eats it, hoping it will still serve as a sample. Jeffrey then admits he knows a way out but won't use it because his rich father will come for him soon. Suddenly, Jeffrey starts screaming, pulling down his pants to show his rear to the guards when they come to calm him down. He begins destroying pillows and is taken away. The next day, Jeffrey and James watch a news story about scientists operating on animals, fueling Jeffrey's ongoing tirade against societal and environmental destruction. They both find it cruel, and James remarks that maybe humanity deserves to be destroyed after all. Jeffrey is shocked but absolutely loves the idea. At that moment, James is given some medicine that soon puts him into a very passive, barely responsive state. Later, Jeffrey shows up with a key he stole from a guard and places it in James's hand. He starts yelling and breaking things to create a distraction, inspiring other patients to act out as well. James remains in a dazed state, so Jeffrey pushes him off his chair to jolt him into action. Moving very slowly and frequently stumbling, James finally reaches the door and manages to open it, leaving the main area behind. He makes his way down a corridor and encounters a guard who, unknown to him, is the future prison warden. The front door is locked, so the guard, indifferent to James's escape, directs him to use the elevator. As James takes the elevator, he accidentally triggers an alarm, and the guards quickly converge on him. They surround him, and despite his struggle where he manages to land a few blows, he is soon overpowered and captured. James is then strapped to a stretcher and left in an isolated room. Later, Catherine confides to the other doctors that she has an unsettling feeling about James. As if she has seen him somewhere before, their conversation is abruptly interrupted by a guard, who takes them to the isolated room. To their astonishment, James has completely vanished, despite the room having only a locked door and no other exits. James's airport dream returns, this time featuring a man with Jeffrey's face running away with a briefcase. Suddenly, he wakes up alone in a room set in 2035. He hears a man with a raspy voice mumbling incoherently, suggesting he might be in the next cell or simply a figment of his imagination. Soon, James is taken to see the scientists, who play a distorted recording that mentions the location of the 12 monkeys. James explains that he didn't send the distorted message, detailing how he ended up in the wrong year. The scientists show him a series of old photographs, and James identifies Jeffrey among the crowd associated with the 12 monkeys. They then offer him another chance to try again. Soon, James is strapped into the time machine, which is surrounded by a tangle of wires and intricate calculations to ensure accuracy. Unfortunately, he materializes in the middle of a World War I battle. As bodies litter the ground, French soldiers interrogate him at gunpoint, but James can't understand their questions. In the chaos, a bomb explodes, and the soldiers bring in a wounded man who turns out to be Jose. While a soldier takes a picture, James struggles to crawl towards his friend but is suddenly shot in the leg. As he cries out in agony, another time jump is inadvertently triggered. In 1996, Catherine gives a presentation on madness in apocalyptic visions. One of her examples includes a soldier from World War I who rambled about a disease that would wipe out humanity. The soldier disappeared amidst the chaos of war, and the picture she shows resembles Jose. After the lecture, Catherine signs copies of her book for the attendees. She is approached by Dr. Peters, who believes that alarmists are often the most sane and that humanity's environmental destruction is the true insanity. Later, as Catherine walks to her car, she is suddenly confronted by a mysterious man who forcibly shakes her and gets into the car with her. Claiming to have a gun, he demands she drive him to Philadelphia, explaining that he doesn't know how to drive because he has lived underground since he was 8. Catherine quickly realizes that the man is James. He apologizes for the attack and insists he needs her help. During the trip, James is thrilled to breathe fresh air and listen to good music on the radio. They hear a news report about a child who has fallen into an abandoned well shaft, but James remains unfazed, recalling that it was a prank and insisting the child is actually hiding in a barn. Meanwhile, Catherine's friends alert the police that she has disappeared. The police search her apartment and find a message on her answering machine from a colleague at the mental hospital, warning that James is back and looking for her. Later, James and Catherine are resting at a hotel. James dreams about the airport again, and this time he sees Catherine as the blonde woman. When he wakes up, he shares his dream with Catherine while still keeping her tied up. James takes Catherine's money and heads to a vending machine for some snacks. When he returns, he notices on the TV that he is now wanted for kidnapping Catherine. They quickly get back on the road, with James reviewing his notes on the 12 monkeys and explaining that they possess the original virus. Eventually, they arrive in Philadelphia and drive around the city until James spots something. He runs to a wall and finds graffiti depicting the 12 monkeys. Catherine considers using the opportunity to escape but ultimately decides to stay and help him. Still convinced he's delusional, James starts following the graffiti on the wall, dragging Catherine along. They come to a halt when a hobo with a raspy voice warns them that nobody can hide because they are tracking them through devices hidden in their teeth. The hobo reveals he removed his own teeth for this reason. They disregard the hobo's warning and continue to follow the graffiti, entering an abandoned theater that has become a refuge for the homeless. As they step inside, two deranged men immediately attack them. James is struck by one of the men, who is armed. To get closer, James pretends to beg for mercy, feigning weakness, then suddenly lunges and delivers a powerful punch to the man's groin. He quickly overpowers the attacker, smashing his head against the wall before turning his attention to the second man. James tackles the second attacker before he can reach Catherine and, with ruthless determination, beats him mercilessly with punches and kicks until the man is dead. After seizing the hobo's gun, James and Catherine flee the building. Outside, James spots a pig statue he recognizes from the pictures shown by the scientist. It marks the headquarters of the FAA, or Freedom for Animals Association. They enter the building, and James demands information about the 12 monkeys from the group inside, brandishing the gun to emphasize his threat. The group admits they used to work with Jeffrey but distanced themselves when he became radicalized, advocating for guerrilla tactics. Jeffrey then formed a new group called the 12 Monkeys. They reveal that Jeffrey's father, Leland, is a prominent virologist known for experimenting on animals. After tying up the group, James finds a picture of Leland. A newspaper article details a notorious incident where Jeffrey released 100 snakes into the Senate. Despite this, Jeffrey later expressed regret for his actions and began supporting his father's experiments. James steals an address book from the FAA and forces Catherine to drive him to Leland's mansion in a stolen car. Still suffering from his leg injury, James is in visible pain. When Catherine notices, she pulls over to steal supplies from a nearby house to help him. Catherine tends to James's wound, carefully removing the bullet in the process. James apologizes for his earlier aggression and grabs her with unexpected strength. Soon, they arrive at Leland's mansion. James hides under a car to avoid detection, but as he emerges, he accidentally drops his gun. Inside, Leland is delivering a speech to his dinner guests, while Jeffrey, pretending to be a well-behaved son, is actually asleep. A guard suddenly wakes Jeffrey, reporting that a strange man claims to know him. Jeffrey goes to investigate and initially pretends not to recognize James. However, his demeanor changes quickly when James mentions the 12 monkeys. Jeffrey then takes James to a more private room, where James continues to demand a sample of the virus. Jeffrey assumes that James wants to spread the virus to destroy humanity, just as he had claimed back in the asylum. In a fit of rage, James attacks Jeffrey, holding him precariously over the edge of a railing. The guards quickly intervene, and James starts fighting them off. Meanwhile, Jeffrey launches into another loud tirade against the system. James exchanges blows with the guards before leaping over the railing, landing amidst a shocked dinner guest. He dashes away, causing chaos in the kitchen as the guards scramble to follow him. Despite their efforts, James manages to escape. Later, in the woods, James opens the trunk and Catherine, angry and frustrated, attacks him. However, her efforts are ineffectual against his strength. Hearing police sirens in the distance, Catherine starts honking the car horn to attract their attention. James dances in the pond, exclaiming how much he loves being outside in the fresh air, only to suddenly vanish. The next morning, Catherine returns home after being interrogated and hears on the news that the missing child was found in a barn, confirming James's claim that it was all a prank. In 2035, James wakes up to find the scientists singing a cheerful song with a beautiful painting displayed behind them. Since James has discovered the origin of the virus, they present him with an official pardon and promise that he can leave once he's feeling better. The situation feels surreal to James, and he snaps, insisting that they aren't real. He then bursts into laughter, concluding that he must be insane, and is promptly injected with a sedative. Moments later, James awakens to hear the raspy-voiced man again. The man reveals that his true desire is to see the sky, the ocean, and to be with her. James wonders if the voice is in his head and if it belongs to the toothless man he saw earlier. In 1996, Catherine struggles with insomnia. One morning, she receives a call from the detective, who reveals that the bullet from James's wound has been analyzed. The ballistic report shows that it was fired before 1920. Alarmed, Catherine hangs up and rushes to review her research. She finds a photograph of the deranged World War I soldier and realizes that James is pictured alongside Jose. Convinced by James's story, Catherine calls Leland to warn him that his son is likely to steal the virus. Leland assures her that his security is tight but instructs his assistant, Peters, to enhance their security measures just in case. Meanwhile, James is trying to persuade the scientists to send him back to 1996. He explains that his previous outburst was due to illness and that he is now well. To test his knowledge, the scientists give him a pop quiz on the virus, asking him to list all the locations where the virus first appeared in the correct order. James passes the quiz easily and notices new pictures of graffiti on the walls of the FAA building, graffiti that wasn't there during his previous visit. Meanwhile, Catherine is outside the FAA headquarters, shouting for them to let her in. The group inside ignores her while revealing that Jeffrey is working with them and that they deceived James. At that moment, a hobo with a raspy voice warns Catherine that the police are watching. She suspects this might be the same man James heard before, but when she asks him, the man becomes frightened and flees. Desperate, Catherine begins painting the graffiti James saw in the picture. Just then, James arrives and announces that he wants to surrender to the police, having accepted that he might be crazy. Catherine tries to drag him away, but it's too late. The cop has already spotted them. Fortunately, they manage to cross the street and a passing vehicle blocks the police car, allowing them to escape. Shortly afterward, they arrive at a hotel where Catherine pays for only a few hours. The receptionist, thinking Catherine is a troublemaker, calls the person in charge of the neighborhood's shady dealings. In their room, Catherine shows James the picture and attempts to convince him that everything is real. However, James is more interested in living a normal life with her and is not convinced by the evidence. As Catherine embraces him for comfort, a man suddenly bursts into the room, accusing her of operating in his territory. Catherine tries to explain the situation, but the man punches her, then pulls out a knife and grabs her by the hair. In a desperate response, James grabs a phone and starts using it to beat the attacker. Terrified, Catherine pleads with James not to kill the man. Instead, James locks the attacker in the bathroom. Catherine, still worried from the sounds of screaming, is relieved when the door opens and James reveals he has removed the man's teeth, just as the hobo had warned. By the time the police arrive, James and Catherine have already escaped through the window. After Catherine also removes her teeth, they board a bus downtown. Catherine uses a payphone to call the number James tried back in 1990. She is thrilled when a carpet cleaning company answers. Realizing they have finally reached the right contact, Catherine starts to doubt the reality of the virus outbreak, thinking it might be a figment of James's imagination. However, when she recites the message she left on the answering machine, James finishes it for her, revealing that it's the same recording the scientists played for him. This confirms that everything James said is true. At that moment, their image is captured by a store's security cameras, prompting them to rush inside and buy disguises. As James looks around, he realizes this is the same building where he previously collected bugs. Later that evening, the 12 monkeys are seen in a bus with a newly kidnapped person, Leland. The doctor warns Jeffrey that he is aware of Jeffrey's plan and has taken measures to protect the virus. Jeffrey dismisses this, saying it's too late, and the group begins making monkey noises. They eventually arrive at the zoo. Meanwhile, James and Catherine are hiding in a theater. Catherine applies a fake mustache and wig to James, trying to complete their disguise. James falls asleep during the movie and dreams of the airport again. When he wakes up, Catherine is gone, but he soon finds her emerging from the bathroom. Her new look is strikingly similar to what he saw in his dream. They embrace and share a kiss. The next morning, the city wakes up to chaos as zoo animals are roaming freely. James and Catherine take a cab to the airport, and the driver explains that traffic is unusually heavy due to the 12 monkeys incident, revealing that they were responsible for the animal escape. As they spot giraffes running around, James and Catherine are relieved to discover that Jeffrey's plan was limited to this, which also explains the "We Did It" graffiti. At the airport, police officers are distributing copies of James's picture to all employees. Upon arriving, James realizes this is the location from his recurring dream. While Catherine goes to pick up their tickets, James uses a payphone to send another message to the scientists, informing them that the 12 monkeys were not responsible for releasing the virus, that he no longer wishes to return. At the front desk, James notices the man with the suitcase from his dream getting a ticket for all the locations listed in James's virus research. Later, James heads to the bathroom to adjust his mustache, only to hear the raspy-voiced man from a stall, who ominously informs him that James isn't allowed to stay. James shouts that he's already completed his mission, but when he opens the stall, he finds only a terrified businessman. On his way out, he encounters Jose, who confirms that the scientists received James's latest message. Jose tries to hand James a gun, but James declines. Jose reveals that his orders are to shoot Catherine if James does not cooperate. In a fit of anger, James starts choking Jose but then calms down and accepts the gun. Meanwhile, young James arrives with his family. At the newsstand, Catherine runs into the man with the briefcase, who turns out to be Peter's. After he leaves, Catherine sees his picture in the newspaper alongside Leland's. She rushes to find James and informs him about Peter's, prompting them to search for him. At that moment, Peter's is stopped by airport security, who ask to inspect the contents of his suitcase. Peter's opens a vial to demonstrate it's empty but is actually beginning to release the virus. Catherine and James push their way through the security line, causing a commotion. An airport employee tries to stop them, leading to an argument. A police officer spots James and attempts to arrest him, but James punches him and rushes through the metal detector, shoving the guard aside. Catherine creates a diversion to buy James some time, while young James watches the chaotic scene unfold. Old James draws his gun to stop Peter's, but before he can fire, the police shoot him down. As James lies dying, Catherine rushes to his side, realizing with horror that young James has witnessed his own death. Catherine is barely able to process her grief before the police take her into custody. Meanwhile, aboard the plane, Peters engages in casual conversation with the other passengers, who are revealed to be the scientists from the future. In the parking lot, young James watches as the airplane takes off, his face a mix of confusion and sadness. If you like movie, please subscribe to get more.